Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to a new week of FPC Radio Live. It's Monday, July the 17th, and we finally have an answer to where will DeAndre Hopkins play next season, and that is, well, with the Tennessee Titans, as we all predicted. But before we get to that, John, I know you're a big tennis guy, and I don't follow the sport, but I did watch the men's final yesterday. At Wimbledon. Very entertaining. Obviously, the hype around, obviously, two participants led to quite a lot of hype and excitement, and I think it delivered. So, John, I mean, again, I guess you're the resident tennis guy here, but was it worth the hype, and did it live up to the hype?
Oh, absolutely. Because first of all, you've got a 36-year-old legend and Novak Djokovic, who's won 23 majors, and now you've got Carlos Alcaraz.
I thought when you said 36-year-old legend, I thought you were going to say me, but I'm sorry. I got a little excited here.
You're getting there. You're getting there. But he's opposing a 20-year-old who won last year's U.S. Open and lost to Djokovic in the French Open just a month ago. So this has become the rivalry now, a 36-year-old and a 20-year-old in there. Games are somewhat similar because they're all court players, so like they can excel on grass, on hard court, on clay. They can hit all the shots. Djokovic has the greatest return of serve in the history of the sport. I don't even think it's questioned. And, you can make the debate of who is the greatest player ever. I still stick with Federer, although he's third in majors behind Nadal and Djokovic, but they're so close. And Djokovic now, and I'm not bashing on him, but he's kind of compiling a lot of these majors while Federer retired and Nadal's been injured. You win when you win. I mean, I'm not taking that away from the guy, but now he's got someone at 20 years old who looks to be on track to be an all-time great because he's got the game. Obviously, he's going to have to stay healthy, engaged, focus, all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's why those other three players are the three greatest players in the history of the sport because they've been around forever. Like, we're talking 15, 16, 17 years. That's not normal to play at that level in tennis. But, just a fascinating match. It looked like Djokovic was going to blow him out early, which he did. And then next thing you know, it's 2-1, Djokovic trailing. And then he evens it up in the fourth set. And when you get to the fifth set, you're like, Djokovic generally doesn't lose 5-set matches, but he did yesterday.
Yeah, and like I said, for someone who, like myself, who's a casual at best viewer, not that I don't have anything against tennis, I just never really got into it. I was fascinated. I was entertained during the whole match and everything like that. So, anyway, so obviously yesterday, the news came out that DeAndre Hopkins has finally chosen a team, John, and it's not the New England Patriots, much to the dismay of a lot of Patriots fans out there, and certainly gives fuel to the fire, excuse me, for all those Belichick detractors out there. To me, it's all kind of silly, all the hoopla going on about a 31-year-old wide receiver. Look, I think obviously he can still play. So adding him to, a team like the Patriots, sure, it could have improved him. Absolutely. And it could have allowed them to do a lot of things. But at the same time, $26 million, John, for a team that's been really trying to dig themselves out of some cap hell the last couple of years. Something that was obviously anticipated going into, the post-Tom Brady era. But the reality of it was Tennessee came with more money. And, I that was really kind of I think we all assumed that's what DeAndre Hopkins was looking for the most. It wasn't necessarily a chance at winning, and not that, the Patriots would have given him necessarily a better chance. I think going into it, I think they're a better team than the Titans, but I don't think they're too different. You know what I mean? This isn't going to the choosing the Patriots or not choosing the Patriots of yesteryear with Tom Brady and all that. This is just, two decent middle of the road teams in the AFC. I think the Titans are, again, they're probably going to win the AFC South unless I think Jacksonville can give them a little bit of a fight. But I think they'll win the AFC South. They'll get into the playoffs, and it'll give them an opportunity to at least compete. How much better I think he makes them, I don't know, John. They really had a terrible offense last year. So at any, just adding any sort of talent like this to this current situation is going to improve him. I just don't know how much. So, DeAndre Hopkins chose the money. If he really wanted to win, he would have taken a very low deal and gone to Kansas City, Buffalo, Cincinnati, one of those other teams that might have been interested that are on the cusp of winning a Super Bowl. But ultimately, he chose the money, and the team that offered him the most was the Tennessee Titans. So, I mean, I guess a good choice for a safe playoff landing spot. But the reality of it is, John, I don't think this changes anything for the Titans in the big picture AFC.
No, I mean, I don't think the Titans or the Patriots are real Super Bowl contenders. The Patriots play in a tougher division. They may be a better team than Tennessee. I think Tennessee finishes second in that division. I think Jacksonville's going to win that division because they have by far the best quarterback in the division. And now they have, the coach that can get the most out of him, and Doug Peterson. But nonetheless, that was about money, and I can't blame the guy. This is going to be probably his last big contract. So go get as much as you can. I mean, if you made enough money throughout your career and you felt that, you just wanted to go chase a ring, then you go to Kansas City or Buffalo or Cincinnati or somewhere else. But if you want to get more money, go ahead and do it. And maybe if he has a big year, he can, expand on that and get more money, whether it's from the Titans or someone else. He's around the same age when Julio Jones went there. And they had given up a second-round pick for Julio Jones, and it didn't really work out. And Jones ended up in Tampa last year. I mean, he was obviously a shell of his former self. But, yeah, I mean, it comes down to money. But, I mean, if the Patriots did have pretty much, I think, top 5 in terms of cap allowance and cap spending available to them, so maybe they could have made this work. And you just go back to what they did 2 years ago. They gave John O. Smith more money than they would have had to given DeAndre Hopkins to sign him, and they gave Nelson Aguilar almost as much money as it would have taken to bring in DeAndre Hopkins. So those were mistakes that they're still paying for.
And I think that's part of the reasoning because, again, this isn't a 26-year-old wide receiver. There's some risk involved in signing DeAndre Hopkins, a player who's missed, during the first, I believe, 8 years of his career, he missed 2 games. He's missed upwards of, I think, 9 or 10 the last 2 seasons, now partly because of injury, partly because of suspension, but if you're the Patriots, $26 million over 2 years, plus, the added incentives that he received from Tennessee, which would add an additional $6 million to those 2 years. That's a lot of money to commit. And again, when I mentioned, that the cap situation, it was mostly building themselves out of that bad situation they were in, mostly in 2020, 2021. But as soon as, you get a little bit of cap space, the last thing you should be doing is paying for, a veteran wide receiver that again, I mean, it may or may not work out for Tennessee. I don't know. And that's the risk involved. And I don't think the Patriots are reckless enough. And I'm not saying Tennessee's reckless. I mean, Tennessee literally doesn't have any wide receivers. I mean, their offense was so bad, John, last year. I think they were bottom 3rd in production. Partly, again, you trade A.J. Brown away. Those are the type of situations you're going to deal with when you can't replace them. And so to me, I think, all right, Tennessee definitely needed something at the wide receiver position. DeAndre Hopkins certainly gives them that. I just don't know if it's going to mean too much big picture wise. I still think they're going to win the division, John. I do like Jacksonville. Just learning from mistakes in the past. I'm not going to go overboard with these universally hyped teams. Like, I like Jacksonville's progression, but maybe we're a year too early with them. And I think Tennessee might eke out another division win. And, I don't think they're going to do much in the playoffs. I don't expect much, at least. But all of a sudden, you do have some talent on that in that offense. So could the Patriots have fit him under the cap? Absolutely. Could they have spent a little bit more? But this isn't a matter of being cheap. It's just a matter of being practical, efficient with the cap. And look, based on the history, and yes, I understand that, that history involved having Tom Brady at quarterback. They've been pretty successful doing that. So to me, I think it's going to help Tennessee. I don't think this is a devastating blow to the Patriots, like some fans are reacting to. And quite frankly, I mean, those are the only 2 teams that were really showing interest, which John might tell you something too. I mean, read between the lines. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins, a 3-time All-Pro, 5-time Pro Bowler. I mean, a guy that averaged 1,200 yards and almost 100 catches every single season of his career for the first 8 years, all that stuff. And only 2 teams showed significant interest in him as a free agent.
Well, the interesting thing is he put up decent numbers last year when you consider he only played 9 games and half of them were with Colt McCoy as his quarterback. He still had 54 catches, over 700 yards, 3 touchdowns. So those aren't bad numbers at all.
Yeah.
I think he can still play. He's not what he was, say, 5 years ago.
Oh, sure.
The Texans, and again, he had Deshaun Watson throwing in the ball, who's obviously better than Mac Jones, Ryan Tannehill, or whoever else is going to be throwing the ball in Tennessee this year. They've got 3 quarterbacks. They get a 3-quarterback competition going on down in Nashville. But maybe he has a good relationship with Mike Vrabel. Maybe he doesn't have a good relationship with Billy O'Brien, and that had something to do with it. But I think most of this was all about money, and that's fine. That's what these guys should be all about at some point, because when they retire, the extra zero or the extra digit in their bank account is going to look nice. Especially if you're trying to set up your family for future wealth and comfortability.
Well, and there is a lot of crossover with the Houston Texans organization from when DeAndre Hopkins was there. Obviously, Vrabel, I believe the Titans' offensive coordinator. I was reading it yesterday, so I apologize. I should have clarified the details. But
Tim Kelly.
Yeah, and he was there as an offensive assistant and a positional coach and everything like that, while DeAndre Hopkins was there. And he was there during Hopkins' most productive stretch, which included 3 straight all-pro selections. So there is obviously the money factor that I do think plays a significant role in all this. Like I said, it's money. I mean, that's what he wanted. I mean, if he really wanted to win, and it doesn't mean he doesn't want to win. I mean, he's still going to a team that's likely going to make the playoffs. But if he really wanted to win, obviously he's not going to try to maximize every dollar, and I think that's what he did here. So, look, good for DeAndre Hopkins. It'll be fun to see him and Derrick Henry, on the same field at the same time. 2 very dynamic players. Certainly, you can argue that Derrick Henry may still be the best at his position. At one point, obviously, I think you can argue DeAndre Hopkins was. I don't think that's true now, but it's not too far off. In terms of if you want to do wide receiver tiers or however you want to do it, DeAndre Hopkins is still an elite player, and I think, again, like I said, he's going to have an impact on whatever team he goes to. I just think the Titans aren't DeAndre Hopkins away from being Super Bowl contenders. They're DeAndre Hopkins away from not being 28th in the league in offense. And that's what they were last year.
Right, exactly. And I look at both of these teams that need to shore up their offensive lines more than anything. I mean, I think Tennessee needed the receiver more than the Patriots did, because I kind of like the Patriots receivers. They're not great, but they have 4 guys that I think you can count on to be good if they're healthy. Juju Smith-Schuster, Kendrick Bourne, Devontae Parker. We'll see what Tyquan Thornton is in his second year. You got Ramondre Stevenson. You've got 2 good pass-catching tight ends. I'm more concerned with the Patriots' offensive line, and Tennessee has the 32nd ranked offensive line. Last time I checked, there's 32 teams in the league. So those 2 teams have to address the offensive line. So you can have the greatest wide receivers in the world. If the quarterback's on his butt, it don't matter. And I think that's really where the Patriots have to kind of cross their fingers and hope that Trent Brown's engaged this year, and one of the 3 cast-offs that they're going to play at right tackle pan out. Because I think the interior of their offensive line should be good now that you've got Billy O'Brien back as the offensive coordinator. Adrian Clem is your offensive line coach. I think you'll be better there. But I still worry about the tackle positions because, Mac Jones needs to be upright to improve.
Yeah, and look, I mean, Mac Jones's strength is being able to sit in a somewhat clean pocket. And look, the kid's accurate, and he's a pretty good decision maker. When a lot of things are going right, he's got to learn how to be a better decision maker when the pressure's on. Sure, I mean, and that's something that you can learn as you grow into the NFL. But now we're entering year 3. We want to see, a kind of a big leap, the leap we've seen from other quarterbacks in year 3 over the last few years. We want to see that from Mac Jones. And the reality of it is, like you said, they're better, I would assume, just by having Billy O'Brien as the offensive coordinator, because it brings some level of consistency and level of planning, I guess, to the offense, some foresight to the offense, and I think that's going to help Mac Jones. But ultimately, like you said, it's going to be about not only the offensive line, but ultimately about Jones's performance, and that could have a lot to do with the offensive line, as it plays out. But I do think they're going to be better. And like I said before, I mean, Tennessee was just awful on offense last year. I mean, Ryan Tannehill was banged up a bit. Again, you trade A.J. Brown away, obviously your best wide receiver. That's going to hurt you. And they just never were able to replace that. So it will it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But good for him. He's in before training camp, because training camp gets started this week. So we weren't quite sure if that was going to be the case. But the saga is over. So before we go, though, John, I want to bring up another wide receiver. Tyreek Hill actually had mentioned that he wants to break 2,000 yards. That was like one of his goals. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, you know what? I'd almost say, like, if you're going to ask me, am I going to take the what am I going to take there? Am I going to take the over or the under? I'm taking the over, John. If he says he can break 2,000 yards receiving, I think it can happen. 17 games.
Yeah, it's a little less than 120 yards per game, and he was on that pace last year until Tua got injured.
Yep.
Right. So if Tua manages to stay healthy this year with 17 games, that extra game that exists now that didn't exist back when Calvin Johnson set the record back a decade ago. Yeah, I mean, he's certainly the one guy that you think can, because of the yards after catch. And in that offense, they really scheme up wide receivers to get open and have some free space. And he's a guy who literally get him the ball, count to three, and then look back. If there's no flags, he's probably heading to the end zone, right? I mean, that's what they used to say about Stanley Morgan, who's now a semifinalist for the Hall of Fame and hope he gets in. But yeah, that's the type of speed and elusiveness that Tyreek Hill has. He's phenomenal. I think, is he the best receiver in football? I'm still a Devontae Adams guy, but I think Tyreek Hill maybe has the biggest impact of any wide receiver, because almost like Steph Curry, he like opens the field up for the rest of his teammates because he's such a deep threat. But I think he can make a go at it, but you got to have Tua healthy, and obviously he has to stay healthy.
Look, I mean, we're in an era where it's such a weird dynamic, because I feel like sometimes I contradict myself, because it's like I don't think, like, wide receivers are far more important now than they've ever been, just based on how the game's played and how open it is and everything like that. Do I think it's crucial that you have to have a top flight elite wide receiver? No. So, and that's where the kind of hypocrisy kind of comes in, because I think it's the opposite with quarterbacks. Like, quarterbacks are obviously still the most important position, the most impactful position. And I don't think you win without an elite quarterback. Whereas I think you can get by with a collection of really good receivers. Now, okay, Tyreek Hill is an elite wide receiver, but I think the position opens the door for a variety of different ways of being elite. So that's why I think we have so many, like, well, who's the best wide receiver in the league? You say Devontae Adams. I'm like, yeah, I mean, absolute pure wide receiver, sure. But then Tyreek Hill, and it's like, wait a minute, no. If it comes, if you're thinking about it in terms of impact on the football field, well, now the discussion is a little bit closer. Well, okay, well, who's more impactful than Tyreek Hill? And then all of a sudden you start talking about, well, what about these other guys? What about, you know what I mean? Long list of wide receivers, especially a couple of years ago when it seemed like we had 5 different best receivers in the league. So I think that creates a lot of great discussion, and certainly creates a lot of great differing opinions in terms of who's the best wide receiver. But I don't think there's any discussion as to who has who could potentially have the biggest impact play by play, and that's Tyreek Hill.
Oh, without question. Like I said, it reminds me so much of the impact that Steph Curry has on a basketball court, because Curry can shoot from 40 feet out if he needs to.
Did you see his hole in one, by the way?
Yeah, he's pretty good at that sport too. I know he loves golf.
You know, I find
when he retires,
that's
he's good at putting a ball in a hole.
Yeah, That's his second hole in one, and I was, for a while I was like, man, I finally tied Steph Curry in holes in one. Now I got to go get another one. So I'll be out at the golf course later. Yeah.
Keep practicing that. But yeah, without question, Tyreek Hill, because of his ability to get deep, I think he just causes the defense to be frantic. You hear the stories of, okay, when the team breaks the huddle, who's the guy that the defense has to put all of their eyes on? And it was Rob Gronkowski here for a decade. And now it's Devontae Adams with the Raiders, but it's Tyreek Hill, whether he was in Kansas City or in Miami. Tyreek Hill's also benefited from obviously playing with Patrick Mahomes and also Travis Kelce and now Jalen Waddle. So we've always had somebody as a pass catcher that was at a very high level as well. So, yeah, and I agree with you, Ian. The great quarterback can get by. Like, Brady, we've seen him win Super Bowls with less than stellar receiving crews. At the beginning of his career, later in his career, he did have Rob Gronkowski, except they did win one Super Bowl without Gronkowski, and it was Edelman, who was, a star in that game. But, yeah, if you don't have an elite quarterback, and I don't think Tua is an elite quarterback, I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is an elite quarterback, it is nice to have Tyreek Hill in Miami and Devontae Adams with the Raiders to make their jobs that much easier. But I think right now you can make a case it's the second most important position on the team. I mean, we talk about it all the time, right? The five highest paid players on your team, most important, are quarterback, wide receiver, left tackle, edge rusher, and cornerback. That's where the money goes to start with, and then you start filling in the gaps with, interior linemen or, inside linebackers, safeties, whatever. But those are the five most important positions. So, yeah, there's so much talent there. Justin Jefferson is one that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Cooper Kupp, get a long list of these guys.
Well, and that's the thing. Just 2 years ago, Cooper Kupp won the Triple Crown wide receiver stats. And it's like, you go back 15-ish years ago, replace wide receiver, replace cornerback with linebacker and running back as the five most important positions. And that's just kind of how the game's evolved. I mean, the quarterback's always been there because, again, it's the most important position, obviously, in football, and you can argue in all of sports, outside of, obviously, a goaltender in hockey, which is the hardest, most complicated position to play, and anyone who's ever played it in their lifetime is one hell of a person. But I might be biased.
Yeah, they are. a little odd.
Yeah,
goalies are odd. We know that.
Well,
right?
they always said we'd have a bit of a screw loose. So
it's better to stand there with chunks of rubber coming at you at 110 miles an hour. Yeah, I think you have to.
Look. As crazy as you think hockey goalies are, hockey goalies think lacrosse goalies are crazy. So just take that into account. Yeah, you would never find me in between the pipes of a lacrosse net. I'll pass.
Good point.
But anyways, so yeah, I think I think he can get the 2,000. I know Joel says in the chat that he has his doubts, but according to Tyreek Hill last year, he was just balling out there, relying on his athleticism. Didn't really grasp the playbook until later in the season. So if that's true, John, that gives me even more belief that he's going to cross that 2,000-yard mark, because in his not understanding of the playbook era in Miami, still set career highs with 1,700 yards and 119 catches. So I think there's potential to add a few more 100 yards to that total.
Someone's going to break it at some point, right? Whether it's Tyreek Hill this year or Justin Jefferson, or when they go to 18 games, which I think is going to happen shortly. So now, obviously, you've added 2 games to the old schedule. That's massive in football, right? That's like an additional 10% of the schedule. That's why I think sometimes with these records, you do have to have asterisks with them. I mean, like, I still think O.J. Simpson holds the single-season rushing record. The guy had 2,003 yards in a 14-game schedule, whereas Eric Dickerson, I think it was 2105, so 100 yards more, but he played in a 16-game schedule. So, I mean, I know it's odd to pump up the tires of O.J. Simpson, but in terms of a running back, I still think it's his record. But, yeah, no one really pays attention to that.
Well,
it's like you see those numbers go up.
It's like Jerry Rice's single-season touchdown record. I mean, obviously Randy Moss holds the single-season record. I'm the last person to sit here and say that. But how many games did Jerry Rice take to get 22 touchdowns? So, if you want to deep dive into those discussions, I think that's certainly warranted and certainly appropriate when, you're having legitimate discussions about these things.
He did that in a strike short season.
I think it was like 14 games.
So 14 or 15. I think they played 15 games. And look, we all agree Brady's the greatest quarterback ever. We kind of agree that Jerry Rice is the greatest wide receiver ever. Like, I mean, because he was putting up these ridiculous numbers before the game exploded passing wise. You know,
12.
There were other great receivers.
12
I know
games.
He played 12 games at 22.
12 games, 22 touchdowns. So that is again.
My God.
Yeah, it's it's absurd.
He was causing the games to go over the posted total by himself. That's like 2 touchdowns a game. No, he's in the discussion, right, with Brady, Lawrence Taylor.
Oh yeah. I mean, greatest NFL players ever. I mean, if you're talking about Mount Rushmore play, and look, I'm a huge Randy Moss fan. I think he's the, at least from what I've seen, second best wide receiver of all time. I think guys like Don Hudson, unfortunately, gets criminally ignored in terms of greatest wide receivers just because he did it in a different era. But he was the Jerry Rice, essentially, of his time. But there is no Jerry Rice outside of Jerry Rice. Everything that he's done. I mean, he's, a lot of the stuff that he's done is like Wayne Gretzky level of separation in terms of records and just what he did. And, people sit there and try to, deny it. Jerry Rice did it in every situation and in all facets of the game in terms of what you do as a wide receiver. And, I think that unfortunately gets sometimes overlooked now with some of the newer, opinions in terms of some of the newer wide receivers. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you're going to be hard pressed to make a case against Jerry Rice. So we're not going to do that.
As Tom Brady. He had the same mentality as Tom Brady.
Oh yeah,
he just outworked everybody. He was so prepared. He was fastidious in his preparation. I think that's a pretty clear one. And I always think Jim Brown is the clear choice as greatest running back ever. I know that, like Frank Gore has more rushing yards, which is absurd. God bless him for accomplishing that. But to me, Jim Brown, kind of sets how the running back position is to be played. And it's never been equal or surpassed.
Yeah. No. So just like this show, John, just like this show. And on that note, we're going to say goodbye for this Monday afternoon. And hey, it's NFL training camp week. So get ready for more NFL coverage. And before you know it, we're going to be talking Hall of Fame game. And then before you know it, then it'll be the first week of the regular season. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And we will talk to you tomorrow.